Welcome to today's Legally Speaking podcast, sponsored by Clio. I'm delighted to be joined by someone who really needs no introduction whatsoever when it comes to the world of business development and indeed client experience. I'm joined by the incredible Matt Dixon. Matt's work has changed how organizations think about selling and serving. His previous books, like The Challenger Sale and The Effortless Experience, have sold millions worldwide. Now, Matt's back with a brand new blueprint for professional services success, the Activator Advantage, based on groundbreaking research from what today's top rainmakers do differently. So if you're serious about winning, retaining, and growing client relationships, you're in the right place. So stick around and let's get into it. So a very big warm welcome to the show, Matt.
Hey, Rob, how are you? It's great to be with you.
It's great to have you on the show today. So
It's great to be here.
let's get straight into it. What inspired you to write the Activator Advantage?
Yeah, I think there's I think in many respects, a lot of these research projects that I've been a part of and the books we've done in the past, there's an autobiographical component and then there's a market-driven component. So I'll tell you the autobiographical part first. So, you mentioned one of the books that I was a part of. I was a co-author of The Challenger Sale, which came out in 2011. So it's been out for a long time now. And that was a study of business-to-business salespeople. So think about those sales professionals who sell products. So whether that's a product you can touch and feel like a manufactured product such as a medical device, or it's a technology-based product, right? Software, so on and so forth, or productized service. But these are traditional kind of bag-carrying B2B salespeople that we studied in the Challenger Sale work. Around 2012, so the book came out in 2011. Around 2012, the book had really started to get traction in the market and kind of pick up steam. And I received an invitation. I'd spending much of my time traveling the world and giving the Challenger presentation at sales kickoffs and things like that. And I got a bit of a unique invitation. It's the first one I had received from a professional services firm. It was actually a big strategy consulting firm to go and present the results of this research at their partner retreat. So I didn't think anything of it. I should have known something was wrong though, because I'd never had a chance to speak to the managing partner before I showed up at the event. They just said, "Hey, here's your time slot. Send me your slides. Away you go." So I show up. I get up on stage, and I'm about 45 minutes into a planned 60-minute keynote. And this is a ballroom of 400 partners, Rob. So what happened next
Wow.
has never happened to me before, and has never happened to me since. The person who hired me, the managing partner, stands up in the front row and starts waving his arms and says, "Please stop, please stop." And everybody in the ballroom including me, is looking at this guy. He gestures for a hand mic to be brought over to him, and then he says in front of the whole ballroom, "Dr. Dixon, you've been talking about selling and salespeople and sales effectiveness now for 45 minutes. And what you maybe nobody told you this before you came to present to us, but we are not salespeople. There's not a single salesperson in this ballroom. In fact, I would go so far as to say that our firm doesn't sell anything." And at that moment, Rob, I thought, what time is my flight home? And could I possibly make an earlier flight and get out of here? Because this is terrible. And but what actually came out of my mouth at the moment, the only thing I could think to say was, shall we stipulate to the fact that there's a mysterious process by which the client's money ends up in your firm's bank account? Can we just call it sales for the next remaining 15 minutes? So he laughed, and thankfully everyone else laughed too. And I finished my keynote. But that taught me a very painful lesson very early on, which is partners in professional services legitimately don't think of themselves as salespeople. And I don't think it's because sales is a 4-letter word to them. I think in some ways we have a pejorative connotation of what it means to be a salesperson, and we don't like to think of ourselves that way as partners in firms like law firms. But I think it more to the point, it's that the job of a doer seller, of a professional, is in fact very different from a business to business salesperson. So I sort of filed this away in the dark recesses of my mind, and I thought, this could be an interesting research project to undertake at someday at some point. And I did what any good speaker would do, is I then spent the next decade turning down every invitation to speak to partners from professional services, because I didn't have anything that was directly on point or relevant or about them, if that makes sense. So fast forward to I think the year was 2022, and we started a conversation with the software company Intap that I think many folks are familiar with, about doing a large global study of what makes top rainmakers different. And I think what we had been observing as folks who had already been in that space a little bit, we'd done some training and consulting with partners and professional services firms, and certainly the folks at Intap had observed this too, is that clients had shifted their buying behavior towards firms and the way they engage partners. And so that was the market driven reason that suddenly there was an occasion to go and study, I think, a lot of the sort of tried and true approaches to business development, but to do so in a new way and understand what is it that's new in the market today, and what have the changes in client buying behavior been, and how have they driven the changes that we're seeing in the most effective way to drive business and engage clients kind of where they are and how they buy.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that story you just shared as well. I can just
I didn't love it
imagine.
at the time, Rob. It was
No, but I admire the thinking on the feet and the way to overcome that, and B, just the way that you sort of positioned it, and rightly so. And I guess that leads quite nicely onto the profile, the
yeah,
activator
yeah.
profile, and why does it outperform the old school, if you like, rainmaker model?
Yeah, so as a backdrop, let me maybe take a minute, if it's all right, and explain two things. I think the first one I mentioned before, which is changes in client buying behavior, and I don't want to eat up a lot of time on this show telling listeners what they are already experiencing day in day out. But our data shows that sinking feeling all of us have in the pits of our stomach, that clients are engaging us and buying from us very differently from how they once did, is true. So I think the axis upon which this industry has spun for a very long time is the belief that if we go in and we deliver great work on a legal matter, for instance, and we build a great relationship with our client, they should automatically come back to us with the next piece of work. Right? That's just
Yeah.
the way the model has worked for a very long time. Our data shows that that model is fraying, and it's evaporating right before our eyes. So if you go back 5 years ago, C-level buyers, about three-quarters of them would report that yes, if the firm I do business with did a good job, delivered the business impact I expected, and if I like working with them, if I have a good relationship with the partner and their team, sure, I'd go back to them again. Today, that's closer to 50-50. So meaning 50% of clients would automatically go back to the incumbent provider, and 50% of them say, well, I might talk to them, but I'm not going to automatically give them the work. I'll invite them to
Mm.
compete for the work, no matter what kind of impact they had for us, and no matter how much I like them. 5 years from now, C-level executives, even fewer of them are willing to raise their hand and say, I will automatically go back to my incumbent service provider. So only about a third of C-level execs will attest to that. Now, there's lots of reasons this is happening, I think. You've got the rise of procurement. You've got legal operations. You've got alternate fee arrangement, alternate service providers on the rise. You've got AI, right? You've got just a lot more competition in the marketplace. But when we talk to partners, they feel this, especially those partners who've been around for a decade or more. The stories we hear when we're out there in the market working with people on this activator training that we do are, they're pretty gut wrenching. I worked with this client for 10 years and we've delivered phenomenal impact and we have a deep relationship. I went to their son or daughter's wedding and they just went with my competitor. Just the rug got pulled right out from under me. And we're hearing these stories now more and more from partners. So this drove this research study that we talk about. Now, before we get to the activator, I did want to share maybe the profiles that emerged. So we collected data on 3,000 partners. The biggest chunk of those partners were lawyers, actually. So about 40% of the sample was lawyers, followed by consultants, accountants, and then we had smaller slices of executive search professionals or headhunters, investment bankers, and PR professionals. One of the most interesting things that came out of this study, though, is a quantitative study, a survey-based study, is that when you look at the data, so we had all 3,000 partners fill out a survey about how they engage clients and how they spend their time and how they pitch for business with clients, how they manage their networks, et cetera. Then we collected performance data from all of the firms that those partners work for, right? So we had that outcome variable. And when we do something called a factor analysis, there's a really fascinating story that emerges. And I won't give anybody flashbacks from statistics class, but it's basically a fancy way of saying we look at a big data set, and the factor analysis reveals stories in that data set that we didn't even think to test for. And the most interesting thing that came out is that all 3,000 of those partners, every single one of them, can be placed statistically into one of 5 different business development approaches. So I'll go through them very quickly, and then let's talk about the winning one, which I want everyone to act surprised when I tell you the activator is the winning profile. Okay, so who are the other 4 though? Because I think this is interesting because it helps us think about ourselves if we are professionals on listening to the show, or if we work with professionals, right? If you're a C-level leader, a BD leader, a marketing leader, etc., COO in a law firm, you can start to think about the names and faces that fall into each of these five. They're not mutually exclusive. There's bleed and overlap, and most partners have all five. The question is, which one do they spike in? So the first one is the expert. The expert is the reluctant business developer. They don't like sales. Sales is a four-letter word for them. They don't believe they should have to sell to clients. What they believe is that they should be found by the client because they are such deep experts in their specific area. It might be IP litigation. It might be digital transformation if you're a consultant. It might be a specific kind of tax advisory work if you're an accountant. But they believe that they've sent a signal to the market through the thought leadership they do, the speaking that they do, their chambers ranking, for instance, if they're a lawyer. And that signal should be strong enough that if the client has a need that aligns with their subject matter expertise, the client should just find them. They should reach out to them on LinkedIn. They should send a request for a call through to through the firm's website, but they should find them. This leads to a very reactive posture when it comes to business development. One CEO of a law firm we interviewed said he felt that most of his partners were experts, and he said their posture is to aggressively wait for the phone to ring, which, as you can tell, he was not a big fan of that that approach. So what that means in practice, though, is that for that these experts get pulled into a lot of competitive pursuits, because by the time the client has found them, they're probably also talking to some experts from other firms as well. And now it can be a race to the bottom on price, fees, terms, and conditions. Who's willing to really, you know, bend over backwards to get the work? Okay, the second one is the confidant. The confidant, this is the most predominant profile, by the way, in law. For listeners to know that about 32%, I think, of all the partners we studied who are lawyers fell into this profile. This is an old school trusted advisor approach. It's not to denigrate the concept, Rob, of being a trusted advisor, because I think all lawyers think of that as the gold standard in the industry, and we have thought about it as a gold standard for decades now. But it's the way that they execute this approach. Their playbook is really built around trying to build a small portfolio of key client relationships, maybe 3 to 5 big clients, and basically stand around and collect matters and fees from those clients, hopefully for the duration of their career. Now, it's not just luck. They do great work. They build a moat around the client built on doing exceptional work, being highly responsive. The client asks them to jump, they ask how high. And then thirdly, trying to build not just business relationships with the client, but ideally personal relationships with the client. So many of the lawyers who fell into this profile, many of them spoke kind of wistfully about the fact, as I mentioned before, I went to my client's son or daughter's wedding, or our families go skiing together on the holidays, or we went to law school together. Now that client is the GC of a big company, and I am their partner that helps them on their legal needs. What they believe is that they built that kind of relationship and delivered that kind of value. It would be unthinkable for that client to force them to compete for the next matter, right? The client should just automatically come back to them. It would be a violation of the kind of trust we built and the kind of impact and value I've delivered. Now, because these confidants have built these deep relationships, the dark side of, because I think a lot of this approach sounds pretty good actually, but the dark side of the confidant is that they tend to be very protective of those relationships inside of their own firm. So it
Mm.
leads to very sharp elbowed behavior. They don't put notes in the CRM system. They don't bring their colleagues in. They don't collaborate in the way that the firm leaders are trying to get them. They don't bring the breadth of the firm's capabilities to bear to the client because they live in fear of what might happen if a colleague comes in and basically rocks the boat or screws up the relationship for them. The third profile is the debater. In the interest of time, I'll call them the sharp elbowed, opinionated know it all. So, what that means in business development is the debater really focuses on telling clients they're thinking about it the wrong way. You think you should do this, and you're coming to me to get help to do that. I'm telling you should go in this direction instead. And I'm trying to get you to reframe your understanding of what right answer is. Now, these people, to tip my mid a little bit, don't do very well in professional services. Clients like the fact that the partners they hire will tell them and be honest with them and tell them when they're heading down the wrong path. But clients also say, if every time I sit down with them they tell me I'm doing it wrong, like that's just an exhausting kind of relationship. I've got to want to spend time with you, and that is not an enjoyable way to spend time together. Sometimes I just need you to do what I know needs to get done. Now, the interesting thing is, if you go back to that challenger research, that debater is probably most closely tied to the challenger profile, which was the winning profile in B2B sales. But what this taught me as a researcher is it's okay to be a debater or a challenger if you're selling a product. But if you are the product, it's a little bit of a tough posture to adopt, and you got to really pick and choose your times carefully around when to tell your client, hey, you're going left, you really need to go right. The fourth one is the realist. The realist is kind of the glass half empty partner. They are um, more focused on telling clients things are going to take twice as long as you think. That is going to cost twice as much as you've budgeted. Your expectation should be a half as high as they are of the outcome or the impact. And it's not because they're Debbie Downers, but I think they do this because they're trying to win trust with the client. They believe that every client out there has been burned in the past by the lawyer who has overpromised and underdelivered, or sent that surprise invoice that is, comes at the conclusion of the matter that was well in excess of your stated budget at the beginning, and now the client's got steam coming out of their ears. They know this happens all the time, and so they try to do exactly the opposite. I want to tell clients what they need to hear, not just what they want to hear. Now, clients love the truthfulness and the transparency, but they also, that focus on what can't be done is a
Yeah.
little bit grating to them, right? They want to think about the art of the possible, what can be done, what can be accomplished. All right, last one, and finally going to answer your question here, Rob, is the activator. So the activator is the winning profile. They who are these people? So the activator is a super connector. So they're very active on platforms like LinkedIn. They're also the most active partners in live settings. So think about a firm sponsored event or an industry conference. These are the folks who go in and kind of quote unquote work the room. Now, they go in with a game plan. They don't just, most partners show up at these events and they kind of stand around and clump in the corner, and they're there to consume the event and hopefully, have a conversation with a client or a prospective client, but they're kind of clumping with their colleagues in the corner. That's not what activators do. Even the introverted activators, of which there were very many we interviewed, say, when I go to an event, there's a serious investment of my time, and I am going to go with a game plan. I know exactly who's coming. I've set up coffees and lunches and dinners and breakfasts and side conversations. I've got a target list, and my goal is to engage these clients and leave with a business card and a next step. So we didn't call these people connectors, even though they're very active on LinkedIn. They collect a lot of business cards at events, because that's not all they do. And I think it kind of undersells what's happening here. Their goal is to not just collect connections. Their goal is to turn those connections into paying client relationships. And the way that they do this is really interesting. They focus on proactively bringing new ideas to clients before clients even think to ask for help. So, new ways to mitigate risk, new ways to capture market share, new ways to save or make money. Again, it depends on what field of professional services we're in. Often in law, it's new ways to think about regulatory change or take advantage of market opportunities, or again, mitigate risks that you might not even be aware of right now. Now, when they reach out to clients with an offer to help around these new ideas, to bring that new idea forth, they're not looking to charge the client for that time. They're looking to pay it forward. In the words of one activator we interviewed, said, "Look, my billable hours pay my bonus this year. It's all of my unpaid work that actually pays my bonus next year and the year after that and the year after that." So again, they're looking to pay it forward. They're looking to establish goodwill with the client. I'm the partner who I was thoughtful enough to bring this idea or risk or opportunity to you and offer a bit of free perspective around it. Now, the it's not just altruism or free consulting. What they're trying to do is then shape the client's understanding of the opportunity in a way that ideally benefits them, even if that client says, Rob, they say to you, I got Rob, I have to get after this opportunity you just brought to me. I'm going to put out an RFP and force you to compete with your competitors. At the very least, what I've done or what you've done in this case, is shaped my understanding of that opportunity in a way that benefits you, your firm, and your team. And the last thing I'll say about the activator is they are, unlike the confidant who boxes their colleagues out, activators do the exact opposite. They are the pro collaboration partners. They are looking to bring colleagues into the client relationship. And there are really two big reasons. The first one is they believe the likelihood of a bad thing happening when they bring a colleague into a client relationship is like almost zero, right? They know that much more likely is the client's going to thank them for making that introduction. Oh, Rob, I had no idea that you guys had one of the world's leading experts in this area. Thank you for making that introduction, and it's been powerful. I think we're going to work with your colleague on that as well. Now, just for making the introduction, you reap the rewards, right? The halo benefit of having introduced a talented colleague to a client. But the real reason they do it, when you ask them, is that they understand the market is changing. and they believe that it's incumbent upon a partner to shift the loyalty, the locus of loyalty with the client, from loyalty to me, the partner, to loyalty to the we of the firm. And the reason that's important is that when the client's just buying from me, that's great, but that's kind of easy come, easy go. It's easy for a client to decide to go with somebody else next time around. But if the client is supported by us across a whole range of opportunities, across the breadth of their business, that is a much stickier relationship that is much more enduring, especially in this kind of topsy-turvy client buying environment we find ourselves in. So again, that's the high level. And we can dig into a little bit more, and we do in the book in great detail, as you know, around what makes the kind of the activator playbook and what's really happening. But that's just kind of a high level. The last thing I'll say, Rob, is that when we look at the performance, just give people a sense, you can be a rainmaker in any of those five profiles. I just want to say that right up front. And surely listeners can think of colleagues who fall, top performers in all five of those. But your probability of being a high performer is not exactly the same. The highest probability of being a high performer is in the activator approach. In fact, with confidants, experts, and debaters, you're actually more likely to find low performers than high performers pursuing those approaches. And then when we look at in our predictive model, the impact of, let's just say, we had an average performing partner, and if they were to lean into one of those five approaches, what would happen? What we find is that activators are the only one that had a positive statistical correlation with performance. And not to put too fine a point on this, but if you went from not very good to very good on activator behaviors, time spent characteristics, use of firm resources, tools, and technology, you could lift your personal revenue generation by up to 32%, which is a really, really big number for us to consider. So it's night and day compared to the other four profiles, which are actually negatively correlated with performance. The more you lean in to those approaches, the less business you're actually going to generate compared to what you could generate if you chose a different path.
Yeah, and I was just sat there nodding along. Everything you were saying is things that I talk to. The way I sort of think about the activated program, you're leading with value off the
That's right.
bat,
Yeah. Yeah.
straight the way. You're serving, not selling.
Yeah.
You're creating, and then through that, you're showing your thought leadership, your
Hmm.
expertise, just through planting those seeds, aren't you? And then I
Yeah.
always talk about the importance of collaboration being domination, and actually, then if you can get that stickiness, we is greater than me, the impact you can have, and all of that good stuff. And yeah, absolutely A plus to all of that. And thanks for sort of giving us that detail to
Hmm.
articulate it, because I think it's so important that people understand that if you can really mirror and get used to these characteristics, you can be hyper successful, particularly
Yeah.
in the world of work and business we live today. Okay, let's try and simplify it to
Sure.
maybe everyday lawyer. So what's
Yeah. Yeah.
one simple shift every lawyer could make today to be more effective at business
More
development?
activator like. So we talk a lot about it in the book. The book is built around what we call the activator model. So the activator model is three core behaviors. It's like six different workflows and habits. It's three mindsets, and it's bringing this to life in five key pivot points for the client. I won't go through all that, but at the highest level, what we like this because it's kind of a mnemonic and it's memorable for folks. But activators kind of do three things. So I'll give you three quick ones. So they commit to business development, they connect broadly and deeply, and then they create value proactively. So, what does it mean to commit to business development? Well, the first thing I'll say, lawyers always love to point out this is a circular logic or tautology, right? Which they were paid to spot, or they were trained to spot in law school. Of course, in what they often ask is, so you're saying the people who do the most business development are the most successful at business development, and that is actually true. But think about this for a moment. Most of us in professional services, irrespective of field, law, accounting, consulting, banking, if we don't want to sell, and if we think it's a dirty word, and we think it's not, not something that we're going to be good at, if we're not comfortable doing it, we will find any excuse not to do it. And that is true for the vast majority of partners. Will let any other responsibility, including client work, firm initiatives, etc., crowd out business development time. And the only time they do business development is when they lose a client, or when they see that their business starting to tail off, then suddenly they scramble and they realize they've got to go out and sell. Activators, though, are very different. They commit to, meaning they carve out and protect time to do business development every single day. And that's my advice to listeners, is carve out and protect that time and don't let it move. And now it doesn't have to be huge chunks of time. I know lawyers have billable hour requirements, of course, but that doesn't mean we can't find those slivers in the day to do a bit of business development. Here's my really practical tip, though, is like somebody who's saying, hey, I want to get in shape and I'm going to buy a gym membership. I'm going to go and lift the heaviest weights they have in the gym is not a great recipe to get you to want to go back and do it again. And so rather than saying, I'm going from no business development right now, I'm in that episodic, I do it when I get around to it kind of frame of mind, to I want to be more activator like, don't go put hours on your calendar and structure that as business development time. Start with something small. And habit formation experts like James Clear, Charles Duhigg, the science is very clear on this. If you can make your habits start off by making them small, actionable, and really specific, that's a habit that's more likely to stick and sustain over time and something you can build upon. And what I would tell you is, again, rather than putting an hour on your calendar, put 15 minutes on your calendar to do BD. And then even more important, put an additional 15 minutes of planning time on your calendar for Sunday evening or first thing Monday morning to think about what am I going to do with that 15 minutes of time when it pops up on my calendar in 2 days or 3 days or whenever I've blocked off that time. So do a little bit of planning time and then you know what to do, but don't overdo it. Don't try to lift the heaviest weight in the gym. Just start small. The second thing, I'll tell you, that connecting broadly and deeply, we activators are network builders. I shared that before. They're building and leveraging their network inside of their own firm too, right? Shifting from me to we and bringing the breadth of the firm to bear. One of my tactical pieces of guidance for partners at retreats is go in your calendar and look at every client meeting you've had for the past few months and the ones coming up over the next few months, and send a personal LinkedIn invitation to the senior leader on the client side as well as all the team members who joined, right? Thank them for their time if the meeting already happened. If it hasn't happened, say you're looking forward to the time. And that, I think, makes lawyers very uncomfortable. I get a lot of like nervous looks when I tell people to do this. And sometimes people say, well, my clients aren't on LinkedIn, which is, kind of a head fake or a self. I think it's a way that we kind of convince ourselves that we don't need to be there. But in fact, our clients are there and they're very active on LinkedIn. And not only that, but they are very open. In fact, expect that kind of connection with you as a service provider to them. It's not untoward. It's the kind of thing they would be quite welcoming and receptive. And you'll be very surprised the warm response you'll get from your clients when you send that outreach. But here's the real reason to do it. And Rob, you know this very well, but I think a lot of lawyers don't, is once you connect with your client, once you do that, or once you follow their company, or you connect maybe and follow their CEO or board member or other management committee members, you are training the LinkedIn algorithm to start feeding you the things that those people care about. What do they post on? What do they comment on? What do they like? And now you're in the flow of information and you're getting an inside view. It's almost like being a fly on the wall around what are they focused on in terms of business priorities. And like it or not, we can have the debate about whether LinkedIn is becoming more like Facebook. I won't take a position on that, but people increasingly share personal things as well on LinkedIn now, causes that they're passionate about, maybe challenges they're dealing with outside of work. And so it gives you this inner view around what's going on. And here's the real reason to do it is if you don't do that and your competitor does do it, don't act surprised when they spot an opportunity and your client goes with your competitor because they beat you to the punch, right? And this happens all the time for those partners who chose not to engage with their clients because their clients aren't on LinkedIn, quote unquote. The last one I'll give you, so creating value proactively. This is all about bringing those ideas to the client before they recognize there is an opportunity. And my piece of advice for listeners is, because you might think, what is that for me? What is the idea I could reach out with? And what I would ask you is a simple question, which is, what's one thing that your best clients understand about a risk or an opportunity? They're getting after it in a specific way, and boy, you wish every other client saw it the same way. And if they did see it that way, they would be lined up around the block to want to hire you for support. Um, Oftentimes, I think in our profession, we have a unique point of view on different risks and opportunities. Work we're doing for our most progressive clients, how do we bundle that into a bite-size or soundbite or a bite-size insight, and then bring it to those clients we're not yet working with, and do it in a pay-it-forward kind of way? As you said, focus on delivering the value first, and the paid work will follow. Right? In every professional I've ever spoken to, when you ask that question, what is the thing you know that you wish every client knew? They have a long list of those things, right? It all starts there. That is tremendous fodder for you to bring forth those ideas. And here's the rub. I get a lot of partners say to me, "Hey, Matt, I don't want to be a bother," right? And so that's why I fall into this mode of aggressively waiting for the phone to ring, right? Because I think clients are busy. They don't want to be sold to. And if they have a need, they'll reach out to me and find me, right? I'm here for them. They know how to get a hold of me. You hear partners say this all the time. But when we talk to clients, their biggest complaint about partners is they don't hear from them often enough. And this is like a jaw dropping thing for lawyers who are like, I don't want to bother them. But your clients are telling you it's not that they're okay with you bringing ideas to them. They expect you to do it. And the reason is they are so heads down on their own business, on their own priorities and their own strategies. You're going to talk to more people like them in a week than they're going to talk to all year. So they want to know, what are those other firms doing? What risks are they focused on? What opportunities are they getting after? How are they using you and your team to deliver new value to their organization? Bring those ideas to me. I expect you to do that. And if you don't, and your competitor does, don't be surprised if I go with them instead of you.
Yeah, and again, just so much rich information there, and things that I agree with, and I talk to, and I use the analogy of new news, and like you said, when you start training your algorithm on LinkedIn,
You know,
if you know one of the partners or one of your clients is into baseball, and there's a big game
sure.
coming up or something, a simple article with your thoughts, or
Yeah.
if there's something when it comes to regulation that's new that could affect their business, all of that stuff you're getting information for. And I've had the pleasure of actually hearing James Clear live at CleoCon, one of Cleo's events, and he was brilliant. And he talks
Yeah.
a lot about
Fantastic.
the 2 minute rule. I'd encourage people to go and research James Clear, the 2 minute rule, and habit stacking, and just to kind of bring that full circle.
Yep.
To your point about he talks about, if you're going to run a marathon, you can't just go pick up your running shoes and then run a marathon that day. He said,
Yeah.
start by a queue, put your trainers by the front door every
Yeah.
morning. So when you walk past them and don't put them on, that queue is telling you that maybe you should start thinking about putting those shoes on to start that running, and maybe run half a K, 1 kilometer, whatever,
Yeah.
whatever. But habit stacking, and like to the point of business development, all that stuff is so powerful. And I
Yep.
incorporate that, and then you build that into momentum. And once you start getting that flywheel effect, for folks who have read Good to Great by Jim Collins, it's very good to harness that. And you suddenly
Yes.
become a BD guru, and
Yeah.
things continue going round and round. This has been an absolute masterclass, Matt, and there's so much more in the book. So if folks do want to get their hands on your book, please can you give us a shout out, tell us a little bit more about it before we wrap up today, because I
Well,
was lucky enough to
I've got a
have a free
prop
read.
here. So you had the free read, right? It's very exciting. So the book comes out May 20th. So available where all books are sold. It's called The Activator Advantage: What Today's Rainmakers Do Differently. And I co-authored that with three of my business colleagues, my business partners. And again, we cover not just the change. We take the readers on a journey from the changes in client buying behavior. What's it like to generate business in today's market? Not what worked for the senior partners and the practice group leaders 20, 30 years ago when clients kept automatically coming back to their service providers, but what's it like to generate business in today's market with today's client? And then we go into the research and the 5 profiles. There's a lot more than what I shared today. And then we share the data. We evidence the fact that activators outperform not just today, but moving forward, they will outperform because what they're doing is selling to clients in a way that is particularly tuned to the way clients are buying. Right? It's a purpose built approach for today's client and today's buying environment. And then we unpack all of those 3 C's: committing, connecting, creating, the workflows, the mindsets, and the pivot points. And then even at the end, I think for firm leaders, we talk a little bit about what is required of leaders to build a platform for activation inside of their firm. So what do we need to do in terms of culture, incentives, and rewards, BD and marketing support, tools and technology? What are activator firms doing differently so that they create an environment where being an activator is the default option for our partners? It's not a thing they're doing that fights the system. It's something that the firm is actually encouraging, rewarding, and no pun intended, but activating. So check it out. Again, it's available anywhere you buy a book. It comes out from Harvard Business Review Press tomorrow.
Yeah, and it was amazing. I have to say, there's so many
Thanks, Rob.
nuggets in there. And as someone who's actively involved in business development and sales, pretty much my whole career with what I do, you learn so much new from just reading these books and
Yeah.
picking up other people's nuggets of wisdom. There's so much data and so much insight. It's so rich. So highly encourage folks to go and check that out. And I just want to say thanks so much for all these insights today. It's very clear that business development excellence today is about smart activation, not just working the room. So
Yeah.
yeah, for everyone tuning in, do go and check out the Activator Advantage once it drops, and be in with a chance to win a free copy as well. Tag DMC Insights on LinkedIn. Share your biggest takeaway or your favorite tactic from this session today with myself and Matt. Tag Matt as well. And yeah, you might be with a chance of winning. But just leaves me to say thanks ever so much for your time today, Matt. It's been an absolute pleasure hosting you on the Legally Speaking podcast. We're wishing you lots of continued success with the book and indeed future pursuits. But from now, from all of us, over and out.
Thanks, Rob.